We often hear about the Kennedys as a clan, but we rarely pause to explore the quiet stories of those who existed on the periphery of the public spotlight. Today we're going to open a door into the life of Kara Kennedy and walk alongside her as she navigates the challenges, triumphs, and intense personal battles that shaped her journey. So, settle in and let's uncover a story that has often been overshadowed yet remains deeply resonant in its courage and complexity. Kara Kennedy was born on February 27, 1960, a time when America was perched at the edge of significant change. The late 1950s and early 1960s saw cultural and political shifts simmering beneath the surface. Televisions were becoming household fixtures, broadcasting pivotal news moments into living rooms across the nation. The Cold War atmosphere, the Civil Rights Movement, and the early rumblings of generational rebellion all collided to transform the decade into an era of tumultuous evolution. Against this backdrop, the Kennedy family was at the forefront of politics, with John F. Kennedy serving as a rising star in Washington and eventually winning the presidency in 1960. The Kennedy name carried immediate recognition, conjuring images of the new frontier, hope, and national rejuvenation. Yet it was also a family intimately acquainted with sorrow, grappling with challenges in the public eye. For Kara, these dual legacies of promise and tragedy formed the unspoken framework of her childhood. Her father was Ted Kennedy, a central figure in American politics for nearly half a century. Little could she have known how deeply the weight of her surname would influence her life's course. From her earliest days, Kara was introduced not just to the airy amusements of childhood, but also to intense media scrutiny. Photographers lurking outside the family home, reporters searching for headlines. These were everyday realities when your father was a United States senator and your uncle was the president. But behind that public facade, Kara's world mirrored that of many kids her age. At least in the small, cherished pockets of privacy the family managed to maintain. Summer vacations along the Massachusetts coast, big family gatherings with multiple generations gathered around large dinner tables, and sibling squabbles that every parent knows too well. These rhythms of daily life offered a certain respite from the storm of cameras and commentary. Yet each year, each new milestone had an undercurrent of something deeper, a persistent sense that the world was always watching, and that each decision, each heartbreak, might end up displayed in glaring headlines. Kara was blessed with a quick mind and a compassionate heart. She was known to be thoughtful, particularly attuned to the struggles of others, a trait shaped by watching her family, especially her father, devote their lives to public service. While many American homes engaged in spirited discussions over dinner, the Kennedys were dissecting policy matters, civil rights issues, and legislative priorities. The passion for justice and equality that Kara absorbed was palpable, almost second nature. She learned early on that a life of privilege carried a corresponding obligation to help those less fortunate. This sense of duty would guide her choices in the years to come, even when public expectations and personal anxieties threatened to pull her life in different directions. Her father, Ted Kennedy, cast a large shadow, partly due to his towering physical height, and partly due to his reputation in the Senate as a formidable lawmaker. He was nurturing yet intense, a man who loved his children deeply, but also understood that being a Kennedy meant grappling with a kind of outsized destiny. He'd already seen his brothers, John and Robert, lose their lives in heartbreaking circumstances, and the weight of the family's collective ambition fell to him in many ways. Whether it was the desire to preserve the Kennedy legacy or simply to care for his children, Ted Kennedy believed deeply in the power of both compassion and perseverance. Kara carried these values too, though forging an identity separate from her father's sometimes proved daunting. Nevertheless, their bond was strong. She was his daughter, but she was also quietly determined to be her own person. In her teenage years, Kara cultivated the interests that made her heart sing. She loved creative expression, from painting to writing, and was drawn to stories that revealed the raw, vulnerable parts of the human condition. While the world might expect a Kennedy child to rush into activism or politics, Kara gravitated toward quieter forms of involvement. She enjoyed volunteer work and found fulfillment in small acts of service that went unpublicized. In the larger context of the Kennedy family, with its famously robust competition and constant public engagements, Kara's gentler spirit might have seemed understated. Still, it had a steely resolve beneath the surface. By the time she graduated high school, she had become adept at appearing composed in front of cameras. Yet behind closed doors, she wrestled with personal doubts. Could she live a normal life, or was she always going to be tethered to the public's unquenchable interest in the Kennedys? When she headed off to college, Kara found herself on new terrain. She craved knowledge, intellectual stimulation, and genuine connections with people who might see her for who she was, not merely as Ted Kennedy's daughter. Classmates occasionally tiptoed around her surname, unsure of how to approach someone with such a storied family line. But slowly, Kara forged meaningful friendships, drawn to individuals who were equally passionate about making the world a better place. She didn't have illusions about the demands of family legacy. Rather, she aimed to discover how her own unique gifts and experiences might be directed toward positive change. This period, while exhilarating, was also fraught with internal questions. She wanted to live in alignment with the values she'd inherited, but on her own terms, without the constant clamor of publicity distorting her choices. A pivotal moment arrived when Kara first considered a career in television production. She possessed a deep love for storytelling and recognized the medium's power to educate and inspire. Producing documentaries or working behind the scenes allowed her some measure of anonymity while still contributing to meaningful narratives. As she began carving out a place for herself in this field, Kara found a rare blend of creativity and service, using stories to highlight social issues, amplify marginalized voices, or explore corners of life that remain hidden from mainstream discourse. It was an ideal expression of the philanthropic ethos instilled in her by her family and her personal desire to remain slightly out of the limelight. Yet life, as Kara would discover, rarely follows a neat plan. In 1986, she married Michael Allen, an architect. Their relationship was a breath of fresh air in an environment often consumed by politics, speculation, and legacy. For Kara, it felt like a chance to build a personal sanctuary separate from the constant glare of her last name. She would go on to have 2 children, Grace and Max, and motherhood became a profound source of joy and purpose. If you ask Kara to name her greatest achievements, she might well have pointed to her role as a devoted mom, someone who wanted her kids to have a grounded upbringing that balanced their famous lineage with authenticity and kindness. With them, she could momentarily forget the swirling complexities of the world and focus on the simple beauty of daily family life. Story time at night, laughter around the dinner table, and the warmth of unconditional love. Of course, it's impossible to speak about Kara's life without addressing the storms that inevitably blew through. One especially devastating challenge arrived in 2002. She was diagnosed with lung cancer. The news was a seismic jolt, a confrontation with mortality that she had never anticipated. Friends and family recall how strong and composed she was, even while facing an uncertain future. She immediately sought the best medical care possible, leaning on the support of her father, who had already witnessed far too many family tragedies, and her siblings, who knew well the fragility of life in a family marred by loss. Over the course of her treatment, Kara displayed a resilience that surprised even those closest to her. She battled the disease with a fierce determination, refusing to let her identity be reduced to the patient. She remained first and foremost a mother, a daughter, and a woman of resolve. During these trying times, Kara poured her energy into philanthropic endeavors whenever her health allowed. She worked with organizations that supported the arts as well as those aimed at improving lives in underserved communities. For her, these were not mere gestures of charitable giving. They were deeply personal commitments. The arts had always provided solace, and she believed in their capacity to heal and uplift the human spirit. By serving on boards and engaging in hands-on projects, Kara found a purpose that transcended her own suffering. She saw adversity as an opportunity to connect more deeply with others who face steep battles, proving that empathy and shared struggle could knit people together across all divides. Surviving cancer is a complicated ordeal. When Kara's treatment led to remission, she emerged physically altered but emotionally fortified. In interviews and personal conversations, she shared that her perspective on life had shifted dramatically. She learned to treasure ordinary moments, an unhurried chat over tea, a casual walk with her children, or a comforting phone call from a friend. While the outside world might consider her remission a triumph, she knew that the emotional scars remained. The brush with mortality made every future moment both a gift and a mystery. She no longer took for granted that time was unlimited, and she began living with an urgency that pushed her to engage more boldly in the causes she cared about. In the tapestry of her life, cancer was a stitch that fundamentally changed the pattern, reminding her that existence is fleeting and that love and service define the footprints we leave behind. Despite her preference for modesty, Kara's journey was unavoidably enmeshed with her father's continuing career in the Senate. Ted Kennedy was often described as the Lion of the Senate, a political titan who championed healthcare reform, education, and civil rights. He was revered by some, criticized by others. As Kara watched him navigate the highs and lows of a public career, spanning nearly half a century, she gleaned insights into both the power of devoted public service and the pitfalls of relentless media attention. While the news often depicted him in extremes, either saintly or scandalized, Kara saw his struggles and vulnerabilities up close. Throughout her life, she was a quiet pillar of support for her father, attending events when her presence was needed, offering a sympathetic ear during late-night phone calls, and carrying forward his passion for service in her own, more understated ways. Her faith in giving back found many expressions. Kara served on the boards of several nonprofit organizations, including one that championed the rights of individuals with disabilities in the arts. From an early age, she'd recognized that art in all its forms, painting, music, dance, had a unique capacity to unite people. Through the creative process, individuals could transcend language barriers, cultural divides, and even physical limitations. Her father's legislative efforts on behalf of people with disabilities paralleled her own philanthropic focus, creating a shared mission of ensuring that every person's talents and contributions were valued. While the press was sometimes quick to highlight a glamorous side of the family's involvement in charity, Kara's participation ran deeper, built on years of personal interest and hands-on engagement. One lesser-known anecdote illuminates Kara's generosity of spirit. A friend from her volunteer work once described how Kara personally arranged for a young artist with cerebral palsy to travel to an exhibition of his paintings. The details, airfare, accommodation, and the setup at the gallery were all carefully handled by Kara, who made sure every aspect was orchestrated with dignity. She never publicized her role in the arrangement. For her, the reward lay in witnessing the artist's astonishment at seeing his work on display, and in the realization that this moment might spark future opportunities for him. This was Kara's hallmark, unobtrusive but deeply meaningful acts of kindness. Kara also spoke about how her experience battling cancer shaped her moral priorities. In one private conversation with close family, she mentioned that standing on the precipice of life and death gave her a sharper sense of empathy. As she put it, "We only survive if we reach out to one another." This wasn't just a platitude, it was a guiding principle. She recognized the fragility of human life and sought to alleviate suffering where she could. That might mean small gestures like visiting a hospital ward with flowers for patients who had few visitors, or larger commitments like spearheading fundraising drives for cancer research. Time and again, Kara demonstrated that even a solitary individual working quietly can enrich the lives of many. But belonging to the Kennedy family also means existing at the center of controversy. While Kara rarely found herself at the epicenter of scandals, she was unavoidably tethered to the swirl of rumors and intense public scrutiny that often targeted her father and uncles. There were criticisms directed at the family's sense of entitlement, stories that questioned the sincerity of their philanthropic claims, and whispers about the personal foibles that come with immense power. Though the controversies mainly orbited other family members, Kara was often caught in the crossfire. One of the most stinging incidents was the media's fascination with her parents' marital struggles. Her mother, Joan, battled alcoholism and mental health challenges, and her father's reputation had been tainted by personal indiscretions. The public devoured every detail, as though the Kennedys existed primarily for soap opera-style entertainment. For Kara, these were not headlines but real experiences marked by heartbreak and fear. She found ways to cope with the relentless scrutiny. A longtime friend noted that Kara retreated into close-knit circles of trusted loved ones whenever the headlines became too intrusive. She believed in preserving her mental and emotional well-being by carefully choosing how and with whom she spent her time. Occasionally, she would speak publicly to clarify misconceptions or defend her father's record, but more often, she chose to maintain her dignity through silence. Controversies came and went, but Kara's dedication to her children and her philanthropic passions remained consistent. Ironically, her life demonstrated that the best response to sensationalism is simply to keep working on things that matter deeply: family, art, health advocacy, without letting external noise derail one's core values. In the broader historical landscape, the Kennedy family has sometimes been described as a political dynasty whose time had passed after the 1960s. Yet Ted Kennedy continued his Senate work into the 21st century, and members of the next generations took up leadership roles in various forms. Kara's approach, though subtler, was a crucial strand of that ongoing legacy. She represented a commitment to public good untethered from personal ambition or ego. Whereas her father's stage was the Senate floor, Kara's was the local community center, the non-profit boardroom, the film production studio. In her own corner of the world, she quietly carried forward the Kennedy ideal of service, refining it for a new era that placed equal value on grassroots efforts as on lofty speeches and grand legislative battles. One particularly poignant memory shines a light on Kara's humility. At a community fundraiser for a small arts organization, she arrived without fanfare, took a seat among the crowd, and participated just like everyone else. She wasn't introduced as a VIP, nor did she request special seating. Only when the event organizers recognized her did they realize they had a Kennedy in their midst. Her father's prominence had taught her the allure of public attention, but also its corrosive potential. Instead of chasing the spotlight, she sought genuine human connection and a chance to contribute. This orientation toward humility and authenticity was, in many respects, her quiet protest against a world that often fixated on the superficial aspects of fame. Kara's mother, Joan, had struggled for many years with alcohol dependence. For Kara, watching her mother wrestle with addiction was a lesson in empathy and resilience. Rather than harboring resentment or shame, Kara supported her mother through treatment and celebrated her periods of sobriety. She knew all too well that the glitz of the Kennedy name did not inoculate them from common hardships like addiction and emotional suffering. This was an area of personal pain that rarely made headlines, but it influenced Kara's compassion for others grappling with their own demons. She believed in redemption and second chances, informed by her first-hand experience with family battles that tested their emotional bonds. Another major turning point came with Ted Kennedy's own health scares. When he was diagnosed with a malignant brain tumor in 2008, Kara confronted the possibility of losing the man who had been her rock for so long. She'd once been the patient, and now she was a caretaker, reversing roles in that ever unpredictable dance we call life. During her father's illness, Kara spent countless hours by his side, helping manage his care, coordinating visits, and offering emotional support. Their relationship deepened in those final years, anchored by shared experiences of illness and the mutual understanding that life is precious and heartbreakingly short. The private moments between father and daughter, away from the cameras, encapsulated a love that had grown stronger through trials. Following Ted Kennedy's passing in 2009, Kara entered a period of profound grief. The man she had admired, argued with, leaned on, and loved unconditionally was gone. Even as public tributes flooded in and commentators declared the end of an era, Kara navigated a storm of personal emotions far more complex than any official eulogy. She took comfort in the idea that her father's legacy lived on, not just through political achievements, but through the countless lives he touched, and through his children, who would carry pieces of him forward. This sense of shared responsibility drove Kara to reaffirm her dedication to community work. She recognized that continuing to serve might help her heal, as well as honor the ideals she and her father held dear. But sometimes heartbreak has a cumulative effect, and the human body can only endure so much. On September 16, 2011, Kara Kennedy died unexpectedly of a heart attack at the age of 51. She had just finished her daily workout at a health club, an ordinary routine she had followed countless times before. The news shocked everyone, especially her children, who were still so young, and her brothers, who had already weathered too many tragedies. In the public eye, Kara's passing was briefly acknowledged in media headlines before the daily news cycle moved on. Within the family and her circle of friends, however, the loss was devastating. Those who knew her best spoke of her radiant kindness, her unassuming nature, and the resilience she displayed in the face of life's harshest challenges. Her death sparked a reflection on the toll of stress and inherited health risks in the Kennedy family. Some close to her noted that although she appeared to have recovered from lung cancer, the treatments may have weakened her physically. Others pointed to a family history of cardiovascular issues. What remained certain was that Kara's life had ended far too soon. She left behind two children, Grace and Max, who would now navigate the world without their mother's steady presence. The heartbreak they endured also resonated throughout the extended Kennedy clan. rekindling that familiar pang of loss that seemed to follow the family's every step. When remembering Kara Kennedy, it's impossible to disentangle her from the larger tapestry of the Kennedy name. Yet at the same time, her story stands as a quiet testament to the power of personal determination and boundless empathy. She chose to live her life behind the scenes, championing causes close to her heart. Unlike many in her family, she avoided high-profile campaigns or headline-grabbing controversies, focusing instead on the tangible difference she could make in everyday lives. This approach, while less visible, was no less significant. In fact, it exemplified a brand of leadership grounded in genuine compassion rather than personal glory. Was Kara's story fraught with contradictions? Absolutely. She enjoyed privileges most people could never imagine, yet she spent much of her life wrestling with emotional challenges, invasive public attention, and physical battles that required extraordinary tenacity. She experienced the heartbreak of watching close relatives succumb to violence, disease, and scandal. She witnessed her parents' marriage disintegrate under the scrutiny of tabloids. She saw her father transform from a figure of controversy to a respected elder statesman, and she grieved the loss of family members in ways that defy simple description. Each of these experiences cut deeply into her psyche, shaping a worldview rooted in compassion and humility, even as they caused wounds that likely never fully healed. In examining the historical significance of Kara Kennedy's life, we see how her story intersects with broader cultural and political shifts. America, in the late 20th and early 21st centuries, was marked by evolving attitudes toward the role of public figures, particularly how celebrity and media attention can overshadow more meaningful accomplishments. Kara's choice to focus on behind-the-scenes work and philanthropy reflects a nuanced understanding of fame's double-edged sword. She witnessed how high-profile activism could either galvanize support or provoke backlash, and she decided that a more intimate, targeted form of service was a better fit for her. This quiet activism is arguably just as vital in driving social progress, reminding us that large-scale change often begins with small, dedicated efforts. Reflecting on Kara's life allows us to glean a series of lessons. First, true strength often comes shrouded in modesty. While the world clamors for spectacle, some of the most transformative deeds happen quietly. Second, our personal battles, be they against illness, controversy, or heartbreak, can pave the way for deeper empathy and understanding. Third, family relationships can be both a source of immense support and profound stress, reminding us that personal bonds remain integral to our well-being, even when they come with complications. And finally, we learn that legacy is about more than the sum of public achievements. It's about the character you demonstrate in everyday life and the hope you ignite in others. Her story may not draw the same headlines as the presidency of John F. Kennedy or the tumultuous career of Ted Kennedy, yet it's a narrative that resonates on a human scale. We can see reflections of Kara's journey in the people around us. Friends quietly fighting personal battles, family members supporting each other through health crises, individuals dedicating their time to causes they care about, away from the camera's glare. Such stories remind us that history is not only shaped by the well-publicized accomplishments of the famous, it's also written in the daily acts of kindness that don't make the front page. And that's all for today's video. Thank you for joining this exploration of Kara Kennedy, a person shaped by an extraordinary name and era, yet moved primarily by the concerns of everyday humanity. May her story stay with you as a reminder that beyond the headlines, beyond the pressures of public identity, lies the fundamental desire we all share: to be loved, to love in return, and to leave the world a little better than we found it. If that was Kara's unspoken mission, she accomplished it in a quiet but profoundly meaningful way. And in reflecting on her life, we might just rediscover the infinite power contained in every gentle act of courage and compassion we offer to those around us.